your appearance doesn't matter. It's what's inside that counts. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Francesco, and I'm going to guess that you weren't expecting some form of inspirational message with this topic. However, this message itself aligns very well with the topic we're going to cover with this video, which is major occupancy. We will also do a couple of examples just to reinforce the concept itself. I hope this kind of makes sense. So let's go for a walk. Let's assume we're in this nice residential neighborhood and that we're just going to go for a stroll through this neighborhood. Nice, right? A lot of nice houses. It looks very nice. But one thing that you might not have noticed is that actually one of these homes we were just strolling by is not actually a real house. This one right here, if we go a little closer to it and just look at it a little closer like this, that's not actually a house. And this becomes even more obvious once we look at what it looks like from a satellite view. Okay, if we look down onto this house, you notice how there's something happening inside the house? There is equipment that seems to be coming through the roof, or there is no roof covering the inside of the house. And that's because this specific building is actually owned by the local hydro authority. Okay, so it's a house that's disguised as something different in that neighborhood, but it's been made to look like the neighborhood so it doesn't attract attention for a number of good reasons. Okay. And that brings us to today's topic, which is you can't judge a building and what it's going to be used for just by the way it looks. I mean, it's good to do that because buildings typically are designed to look a specific way to serve a specific purpose. But for the purposes of this building code course, we need to learn that it's what's inside the building that counts. That is the concept of occupancy in general and major occupancy in particular that we're going to be covering with this topic. The inside of a building, occupancy, basically tells you the who and the what of a building, which brings us to the concept of fake buildings. And I'm usually interested in this concept itself. I'm going to link for you a few of these videos that I'm kind of showing you on the screen right now. Fake buildings are purposely designed to look like their neighborhood but serve a different purpose. And I'd recommend you check them out. The building that I was showing you is in Ottawa, but some of these fake buildings are throughout North America and Europe. The question, though, is why does knowing about fake buildings, or that it's what's inside that count, really matter for the purposes of this course? Well, consider this, okay? Related to building occupancy. Let's say you have two identical buildings. They look exactly the same, except one of them is a library and the other one is a hospital. Okay? And you can't tell the difference just by looking at them. Can you see how the fact that this building is a hospital matters in a way that, say, the corridors need to be much wider and have no obstacles? Unlike, say, a library where the corridors can be much thinner and not as wide, because it's okay if there are obstacles because they're meant to simply browse. Whereas if you need to get through a corridor with a patient, you can't slow down to get around obstacles. Do you see how what a building is going to be used for and who's going to be using it matters to various things in that building? Okay, that's what I'm trying to get across with the whole idea of is what's inside that matters. That concept of what's inside that matters is called occupancy by the Ontario Building Code. Occupancy is a way to describe, using one word, who will be using that building and what that building will be used for. The Ontario Building Code, in fact, specifically describes major occupancy as, and here's a definition, I'm just reading it off the Ontario Building Code. Occupancy means the use or intended use of a building or part of a building for shelter or the support of persons, animals, or property. Basically, who will be using it and what will it be used for? The who or what of a building is called occupancy by the Ontario Building Code. Okay? Major occupancy is a refinement on the general concept of occupancy. So that is, the Ontario Building Code, and they weren't the first ones to do it, but in the Ontario Building Code, various types of buildings that serve a similar purpose in terms of the who and the what have been grouped together in these 7 groups from A to G. These groups are labeled A to G and they're named something specific. I'm going to just read them for you. Group A is called assembly. So all buildings that serve a purpose for assembly purposes are grouped in Group A by the Ontario Building Code. Similarly, detention, care and treatment, and care buildings are grouped in Group B. Residential buildings in C, business and personal services building in D, mercantile buildings in Group E, industrial buildings in Group F, agricultural buildings in Group G. Now, you'll notice that all of the names of these groups are italicized. So that means that each of these names are specifically defined in Division A, Article 1.4.1.2 of the Ontario Building Code. We talked about this in Topic 1, so go check it out with more information about what definitions and what their purpose is. Now, what the Ontario Building Code also found is that some of these groups furthermore need to be subdivided into smaller divisions, or subgroups if you want to consider it, but they're called divisions. So for example, Group A has been broken down into 4 divisions, A1, A2, A3, A4. Okay, so Division 1, 2, 3, and 4. We call them, in the business, we just refer to them as A1, A2, A3, A4. The long way to describe them is Group A Division 1, Group A Division 2, Group A Division 3, and so on and so forth for all the other ones too. A1, A2, A3, A4 is fine, okay? So for assembly, for B, occupancies, for industrial, and for agricultural, there are divisions also within the groups, okay, as shown right here. Another place where you can find this list of groups and divisions and their specific name and a small description, like I said, is in Division A, Article 1.1.4.2, like I'm showing right here. You can also find some more information about this for all groups except G in Table 3.1.2.1 in Division A, Part 3, like I'm showing here. If you're looking for the table for G occupancies, agricultural occupancies, you'll find that in Division B, Table 2.1.4.1. So this is under Part 2 of Division B. Now, I want to point out this, okay? Agricultural occupancies, we're going to chat a little bit about them in this video, but we're really not going to cover them for the purposes of this course. This course will cover a lot of the other occupancies, but not agricultural, okay? There should be a separate course altogether, I guess, if we're talking about agricultural, but I want you to be aware of them, okay? Another place you're going to find more information related to all the major occupancies except for agricultural is what I just showed right here, Appendix A, under Article, where was it? 3.1.2.1.1. So that's the sentence. So I'm showing it here, and it's very interesting because it lists examples of those kinds of buildings for that specific group and division. You can see them right here, they're listed. And that's very helpful, as you can imagine, because if you're analyzing a building and you're not sure what kind of group or division or major occupancy it is, you want to start with Appendix A, if there are, any major occupancy from A to F included, and you just look at the specific example, and that will help you decide what major occupancy it falls under. That's true also for agricultural buildings. I'm listing the location for Appendix A for agricultural buildings, where you can find the list of examples of agricultural buildings broken down by group and division. Okay, we're going to practice for this course, for this topic, examples of how to find the major occupancy of a building, and we're going to do that in 3 steps. Step 1 is to start with Appendix A. So whether you're going to be using whether you're identifying a major occupancies from group A to group F, and you would use this portion here, Appendix A, or if you're looking at agricultural occupancies and you use this portion of Appendix A. Step 2, then, depending on where you're starting in Appendix A, that also tells you what table to use. So you'd use table 3.1.2.1 in Division B for all major occupancies except agricultural, or you'd use table 2.1.4.1 in Division B for agricultural occupancies. And finally, you would list the final answer and the Ontario Building Code references that helped you figure out that final answer. Okay, I'm talking to you, my students. Now, you have to be aware of exceptions. That is, there are certain major occupancies that are not going to work, and some that you need to look at very carefully. And I've listed the exceptions here. Under 3.2.1.1.1, so that's the sentence in Division B, there are exceptions for all major occupancies except agricultural. And then under sentence 2.2.1.3.1 in Division B, you're going to find exceptions related to agricultural buildings. So make sure that you read those, okay? Also, by the time we're done with some of these examples, you'll be able to do homework 1, question 1. Now, doing homework can be difficult sometimes, so what I've done is I've embedded in your homework how to get started with question 1, because I've solved some of them for you. And for those of you that are just catching this video on YouTube, I'm going to link these examples for you in the description below. That way you too can see how I would figure out the major occupancy of certain buildings. Okay? Now, let's do an example together. Let's say we've been asked to find the major occupancy for this office building. We're being told that this office building is nothing more than an office building. So we're going to start with step 1 and use Appendix A. Office building doesn't sound agricultural, and here's a tip. For the purposes of this course, we're really not going to be using any agricultural buildings. So I would start with Appendix A with this location here. So that is sentence A-3.1.2.1.1 to see if I can find anything in there. So I'm just going to show you what I'd be using right here. So this is the major occupancy classification. And what this contains basically within it is examples of buildings for each group and division. So for each major occupancy that you can think of. So the way that you would do this is you would start with Group A Division 1, read all the examples, and repeat that for everything up to Group F Division 3. So you don't stop as soon as you find something that's similar to what we're looking at, in our case, office. You read everything because sometimes some of these major occupancies can appear in different places. One example, restaurants. Another one, police station. Okay? But nonetheless, so if you start reading all of these and you read them all and they're in alphabetical order, okay, the first thing that you would find is offices, you'd find it right here. Under Group D, you would find offices right over there. You don't stop there and say, hey, it's a Group D major occupancies. Instead, what you do is you read all the way to Group F Division 3, all of it, to make sure that you didn't miss that one example that appears more than once. Okay? In this case, I've done it for you. Offices does not appear again. So we can go back to here. We started with Appendix A, and then we move on. So far, it looks like that offices might be a Group D major occupancy. So step 2 then is to use the corresponding table for the description of what that major occupancy is. And for these major occupancies that are not agricultural, table 3.1.2.1 in Division B is the right place to go. So I'm going to bring that up. So we have table 3.1.2.1. We have Group D right here. And the name of this group of D major occupancies is business and personal services. We could have gotten this information also from the description of all the major occupancies that we find under Division A, where the definitions are right here. okay? But this is perfectly acceptable as well. So now we know that offices is a group D and it's called business and personal services. Okay. The final step is to write down the final answer that we came up with and the corresponding building code references. So in our case, we found that an office building is a D major occupancy. It's called business and personal services. And for references, we use the appendix, this sentence in the Appendix A, and this table in Division B. Okay? It is that simple, and if it can help, you can check out the examples that I've already solved for you to see how to do this, okay? How I would solve them. I'm going to link them for you in the description of this course below. If you're one of my students, they're linked for you in the homework, okay? And you know where to find that. Okay, homework one, question one is ready for you to get started. Let's do something different. There's some green here so you can see me through this. Okay, pretend I'm not here, okay? We're going to look at something different. We're going to look at this building right here. Here, let me cover myself for now. And there's something special about this building. This building is set up in such a way that the bottom story is a restaurant that we've identified as an A2 major occupancy. And the remaining, 5 stories above that is an office. So D major occupancy. I'm back. How does that affect your analysis of a building when you have 2 or more different major occupancies? In this case, D and A2. Well, that's a good question. First, you want to go and check out this sentence in the Ontario Building Code, because what it tells you is that whenever you have more than one major occupancy in a building, it essentially tells you, read it, but it essentially tells you that you have to analyze the building as if it were all D, all A2, and then get the most stringent scenarios from both of these major occupancies, okay? I'm going to read it for you if that makes more sense. A building intended for use by more than one major occupancy shall be classified according to all major occupancies for which it is intended to be used or it is used. Okay, so basically you have to find the most stringent conditions of both of these major occupancies, pretending it applies to the whole building, and use those to get the most conservative result for that building. The reason this is important is because it has specific considerations for fire rating purposes. So for how walls, floors, roofs, and ceilings are built, constructed, and set up. And that's where this sentence 3.1.3.1.1, come into play. So let me show you. All right. You find sentence 3.1.3.1 here, and it points towards this table, table 3.1.3.1. And what this table contains, as I'm trying to point at right here, is the minimum fire resistance rating of the fire separations that are making up the floor, ceilings, walls, roofs that are separating one major occupancy from the other. We will talk a bit more about fire resistance rating in a bit more detail in a future topic, but for now, consider this as a measure of time for which you expect a fire separation, so a wall, a floor, a ceiling, a roof, to burn to give enough time for people in there to get out or be rescued. Okay? In our case, we have a D major occupancy and we have an A2 major occupancy. So the way that you would use this table is you'd look along the top and side of the building where the major occupancies are listed, and you find the ones for this example. So D and A2. And then you see where that column and row intersect, and it gives you a value inside that table. The number, the larger of the two numbers, that 1 refers to 1 hour. So it's saying that the fire separation between group D major occupancies and A2 major occupancies have to be rated and built for a 1 hour separation. Whereas the number 4 there, you see that little 4 next to 1, points to the notes below the table. So it's pointing to note 4, this one right here. What this note reads in this specific case is Where the building or part thereof is constructed in accordance with Article 3.2.257 or 3.2.260, a fire separation with a 2-hour fire resistance rating is required between Group D and A2 major occupancies. So what this note is saying is that you have to check to see whether or not these two major occupancies are built in accordance with those two articles, 3.2.257 or 3.2.260. And if that building is built according to these two articles, then you have to increase the fire rating from 1 hour to 2 hours. Okay, so you have to go and check those articles. You can't just increase the fire separation to 1 hour. You have to check those two articles first. And if those two articles do not apply, then you use what's in the table, which is 1 hour. Okay? And that's, as you can imagine, is going to be an example of what you're going to be doing in the homework. Okay? So basically, from the table, we get that a fire resistance rating of 1 hour is required between these two major occupancies. And that's because there is not enough information given for this general example to satisfy those two articles in Note 4 to which the table is pointing to. So you have to revert back to what the table is saying. So what happens when you have two or more major occupancies is you have to go and see how that affects the fire resistance rating between those two major occupancies. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about this table that I just showed you, just to explain a bit more what is contained in that table. Okay, so you'll see it right here. The contents of that table, you might find a number that's in bracket. When you find a number that's in circular brackets inside of this table, it means look at the note that's below the table. So you have to check to see if that note applies or not. If it applies, you have to go to where that note takes you, okay? If it doesn't apply, you revert back to what's inside the table. The other thing you might find inside the table is just a number, okay? With no brackets. That number there is a value in hours that measures the fire resistance rating of the fire separation between those two major occupancies. Another thing you might find is just this straight horizontal line. You can see them in here. That means that those two major occupancies that give you that result either don't require a fire resistance rating separation or just can't happen together. Okay? It's the equivalent of saying no fire separation required between those two. And finally, you might get a number that has a number in brackets next to it. So that means that you're given a fire resistance rating, but you must first check the note below the table to see if it applies. And if it doesn't, you can use this number. But if that note applies, you have to go to those articles to use the different number. Okay? And you're going to get some practice for that in question 2 of your homework number 1. Hey, I know what that is. That means we've reached the end of this video topic. So I want to thank you so much for your time. You've been lovely. Topic 3 is the next one. And what we're going to do in topic 3 is learn how to figure out where to start in the Ontario Building Code. The Ontario Building Code is like 3,000 pages or so of building code. Where do we start? How do we know where to start in the Ontario Building Code? I hope that makes sense. I'll see you in topic 3. Bye, everyone.